Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Table Talk. I'm your host, Jake Combs, and tonight we are going to be doing some Warcry unboxings. Officially, well, technically yesterday, the new Sylvaneth Legions of Nagash boxes were released, as well as the individual warband boxes for the K-Knight, I can't remember what they're called, the K-Knight Shadow something, as well as the Scions of the Flame. And in addition to that, we got all 4 faction books, as well as the 2020 Tome of Champions. So quite a bit to go through. We're not going to be going too in-depth on the books, just highlight some big things that stand out. I did have a little bit of time that I actually flipped through that over the past week. These, as you can see, are still sealed, so we're going to be opening those for the first time. Now, personally, I have never played Sylvaneth, but back in the 90s, before Age of Sigmar was a thing, I was a big Undead player. I actually used the old Nagash model, so playing a Legions of Nagash army definitely has me very interested. But one of the things that I was surprised to see when I came back to the hobby about 5 or 6 years ago was the fact that with Age of Sigmar there were no wood elves. And then when I learned that the Sylvaneth were basically the tree spirits that had bewitched the elves into becoming wood elves, definitely gave them a lot more history that I would have expected, plus the fact that it made them much more interesting for me too. Now, opening the package, I mean, this box is one of the taller boxes to begin with, and it's freaking full. So, other than the bases, of course, we have 5 sprues. Now, looking through it, just tons of detail. I love the Kurnoth Hunters, especially. Those are some of my favorite Sylvaneth models. And I just love the detail on their weapons, especially. And I'm willing to bet that you can actually go with any assortment of the hunters as far as armaments, because it looks like we have we have 3 of these kind of scythe looking things, 3 of the swords, and then we have, let's see, 3 of the bows. So we basically can make any number of the Kurnoth Hunters. If we wanted them all 3 to be the same, or 1 of each, or whatever, we have enough to do them all. So I really like that. It does mean you're gonna have some extra bits as well, so that way you can do some conversions and things like that too down the road. And then the Tree of Revenants also look really cool. I like that they kind of are a takeaway from the old fantasy dryads that we used to see, and kind of showing the spirits leaving the tree itself. So definitely some very cool models. Again, there's a ton of detail. I really love the look of these models. Of all of the order type factions from Warhammer Fantasy, the Wood Elves was the only order based one that I really enjoyed. So these definitely are going to be some of my favorites, at least aesthetically. And then so we got our usual tokens. We have a really thick instruction guide going through the various builds. Like, you can make up to 5 tree revenants, up to 5 spite revenants, and then the 3 different Kurnoth hunters that you can choose from. So definitely a lot of bits come into play here. Now, one thing that surprises me in this assembly guide compared to other ones is there's not as much color to really highlight where pieces are going as much as they usually do. So maybe it's just, you know, these may have been older models as far as the assembly guides were concerned, and so they didn't update them for this book and just brought them into it. I have no idea. As I said, I'm not a Sylvaneth player, so I can't say with certainty, but definitely is the feeling I get from it. Now, as always, we have our Warband abilities cards in various languages. And then we have our various cards. So it's our various revenants. And then we have basically 2 of each for with variations for each of the Kurnoth hunters. So very cool looking. I definitely really like the color choices that they did in those. Especially, let me find it. This one right here. So definitely very cool. Now the trick is going to be getting everything to fit again. Because like I was saying, when I pulled these out, it was a tight fit to begin with. Alright, there we go. So I think it's kind of fitting, at least personally, for the 2 new boxes to be the closest to the armies I used to play that were not Chaos related from back in the day. So definitely not nearly as tight of a package here. This one we've got 16 models. We have the Necromancer, 5 Graveguard, and 10 Skeleton Warriors. Definitely like that we can bring in a banner into play. Not nearly as much detail on these guys as the Sylvaneth. Now, of course, the Necromancer is another story entirely. Really like the scenic base they've kind of designed for him. And looking at these, you know, I love the horn, the various shields at different layers of decay. So these guys are definitely gonna be a lot of fun. A lot more personality into them than a lot of the Skeleton Warriors used to have back when I used to play Fantasy. So very cool, and I love the variant shields. Usually for most of the undead models when I used to play, to get like a shield looking like this, you actually had to carve those chunks out yourself. And so I'm really looking forward to using these ones that look a lot more decrepit. And then we have our undead kind of colored tokens, our ability card. A lot fewer cards overall. Looks like some variations of the various warriors, mostly taking into account in the ones that are actually in the warband, and then our necromancer himself. Now what surprises me here is that most of the warbands boxes, you got, at least for the ones that were existing factions, you got a card that, or at least one card that wasn't available in the packs. And with as few cards as we got in there, I suspect that that might not be the case, unless the necromancer was not one of the ones that you got in the actual booster packs. But those guys are definitely a lot of fun, especially to personalize them a bit more. But now we're on to the books. So we're going to start with the Tome of Champions. Last year's Tome of Champions was a personal favorite of mine. Now, it does have some updated campaign rules. One of the big changes there is that Lesser Artifacts table has been changed to allow consumable artifacts to be used as bonus actions instead of normal actions. Let's see, and then we have a lot more stuff for open play, added in dungeon pit fights, so you can include a pit fight in the campaign. Adding stuff for some narrative play. And as always, they do a fantastic job with the images that they use. Some various campaigns that you can do that are preset, as well as the end to your campaign, and then some warband rosters you can use. And they have basically like a fated quest for a lot of the main warbands out there, or at least a themed one for them to play in. And then this is the part that really got me, is that they've added in new challenge battles. Now, if you can see in that picture, that is a Mega Gargant. And from what I've been told, I mean, that model alone goes for about $200 by itself. And so to play a match where you're going against that guy, I mean, it's pretty obvious that, like, I mean, they even say it in here that, you know, it's going to be 2 warbands against this guy. And so definitely be a lot of fun. Definitely a big challenge to begin with, too. And it looks like this, you know, okay, this is the Wrath of Clorg one. They also have one about fighting the Lord of Change. So definitely bringing in a lot of the big monsters to play against. We have a lot of new artifacts, lesser artifacts. We have a new match play section specifically for the 2020-2021 season. So these would be the maps used. So just give you a quick glance there. Escalation tournaments. And then we have the appendix at the end, which includes new Roman beasts. Now, the ones that stand out the most here is that there's a lot of undead in here, but some of these were in the previous tome. But the ones that weren't are these added Trogoths, and I believe the Wild Cave Squig was not in the previous tome either. So definitely very cool. I know some of the other stuff that was in the Monsters and Mercenaries book, that has actually been brought into the faction books. So the couple big things, there were some rumors when these were first announced that you might be able to build a warband using just the like just units from destruction or units from chaos, instead of picking and choosing a specific warband type. And from the very light skimming I've done so far, I have not found this to be the case. Now, I obviously haven't read every word, every page, so there might be something in there that allows for something like that that I haven't seen yet. But I do not think that this is going to be the case. You know, the little bit of skimming I've done of the different warbands definitely imply that when you're playing that warband, you might bring in some, you know, like a specific ally or something that's faction related, or a monster, but you're not bringing in, you know, with the Iron Jaws, you're not bringing in some Gloomspite with you at the same time, unless you're playing like a 2v2 match, and so, you know, your teammate is using Gloomspite in that scenario. Now, big things here. I mean, we have the Arachnarok, we have the Aelgazar Gargant, the Dankhold Trogoth, Fellwater Trogoth, and Rockgut Trogoth. These are all things that you can bring into it. Now, one warband that I don't remember seeing before is the Gabapalooza. Now, I don't recall there being a card pack for them. There may have been a White Dwarf feature that I don't remember looking at for them. We have the Ogar Maw tribes, and the Bone Splitters, the Iron Jaws. Excuse me. And then we go into our background tables, which will actually help you with naming your characters if you don't want to come up with names yourself. Various related campaigns and challenges for the warband itself. So it's fated quests specifically for destruction. And spoils of victory, challenge battles, some of the things that you can fight. A right old mess, gargantuan carnage. So definitely some cool stuff there. Now, most of the other books are very much the same. We're going to save Agents of Chaos to last, because that one's actually got the biggest changes to discuss. Bringers of Death is obviously the Death book. In here we have Flesh Eater Counts, Legions of Nagash, the Terrorgeist, the Zombie Dragon, which from what I remember before, I believe we only had the Zombie Dragon. That was available, but we also have dire wolves, fell bats, bat swarms as well. Then we got the Flesh Eater Courts, Legions of Nagash, like I was saying. And what's great is for each section, it actually starts with Legions of Nagash. We have all of the leader options that you can choose, and then go with the rest of your legion. We also have Night Haunt, same deal there. Those Yard Bone Reapers, and then we're back to the background tables and the fated quests and things like that. Now, Sentinels of Order, a bit thicker. Mostly because there's more warbands available. Now, with monsters that you can actually get, there's the War Hydra, the Carabitus. That's actually it. Then as far as the warbands go, we have Cities of Sigmar. So this is one of the warbands from White Dwarf, and it actually has abilities for fighters and leaders from different Cities of Sigmar. And then we have the shield bands, so specifically the more dark elves units, and then the various other ones that we have, including the Um, the Caradon Overlords and all those others that fit under Cities of Sigmar. And then, so this is going to be the most dynamic option, where you can basically pull from the different order units to make up the Cities of Sigmar, with the exception of the Stormcast Eternals. And I don't believe that there were any other factions left out of that. That is contained in order. So we also have the separate Daughters of Cain. The Shadow Stalkers, so those are the warband I was trying to remember. Fire Slayers, another White Dwarf warband. Ideneth Deepkin, Caradon Overlords, which gives us a lot of cards now. What surprises me, honestly, is with the newest issue of White Dwarf coming out like a week or two ago, was before this came out, I expected to see the Bugman's Son card in here as well, but it's not there. We have the Lumineth Realm Lords, another White Dwarf one. Then we have Seraphim, or for those that have played Fantasy and don't really know what they are, it's the same as Lizardmen. Then we go into Stormcast Eternals, the various Warrior Chambers. So it's Warrior Chamber, Vanguard Auxiliary Chamber, Sacrosanct Chamber. Then we go into Sylvaneth. And list those same models that we already looked at. Doesn't look like there's anything in there that I didn't see in those cards we already got. Then we go into our narrative play, naming your warband, things like that. Order Fated Quests. And then that's it for order. So we're on to the last book now, Agents of Chaos. And so I know that some people have already leaked the images about the new Hedonists, or Hedonites of Slaanesh. Now, one thing I do want to point out is in this book, you do have the Chaos allies, the Fulmired Crusher, Ogre and Myrmidon, Mindstealer Sphinx, under Monsters and Thralls. We now have the rules for the Chimera listed here, so that way if you weren't able to pick up the card but you have a Chimera model, you can now use the rules without having to print a unlicensed copy. We also have the Slaughter Brute, which I don't remember seeing before. The Chaos Gargant, the Gorgon, Cygor, Vortex Beast. Now, this one I'm really excited for, just because it's absolutely an insane looking model, and that is the Hell Pit Abomination. Now, I know for a fact that that was not in the previous tome or the Monsters and Mercenaries book, while most of these others were. So, I mean, with those being in there, definitely want to get one of those models just to have. I mean, he's 305 points by himself, which rivals, most units by far. So you would easily have to give up like 3 to 4 units in order to bring him in. And then we have, our Beasts of Chaos section, the Blades of Corn, specifically Bloodbound, Demons of Corn, the Bloodletters, Disciples of Tzeentch, the Arcanite Covens, the Fate Twister bands, which is mostly the demons. Then we go Maggot King of Nurgle with the Rotbringers, the Befouled bands, which is the demons. And then here we are with the Hedonites of Slaanesh. Now, the Slaanesh Sybarites, Dark Revelers, these guys are all new. Great looking models from what we can see from those little images. And then, so you can actually see some of them writing some of the Slaanesh demons. Then we have the demons of Slaanesh, which, from what I recall, were already available for cards. Then we have Skaven, which we've already seen, with a lot of different options that you can bring in. A few of them I don't actually remember seeing in the other cards. And then with Slaves of Darkness, this is another one that caught my attention, because if you have the Start Collecting box for Slaves of Darkness, you have a lot of these models already. Now, some of the ones that you can actually use as your leaders were only available in the Monsters and Mercenaries as allies, and that would be the Dark Oath Chieftain, the Dark Oath War Queen, Chaos Sorcerer Lord, Chaos Lord, and one of my favorites, the Chaos Lord on Karkadrak. So definitely very cool. Then we go to the Iron Golem, Untamed Beasts, Corvus Cabal, Cypher Lords, so nothing new there. The Unmade, Splintered Fang, Scions of the Flame, and the Spire Tyrants. And then we go into the narrative play. And then the Fated Quest and such. So a lot of really cool stuff here. Now, if you're somebody like me that wants to collect every faction, you're going to need all of these books. You're going to need to continue to keep getting the Tome of Champions as they release, and continue buying the box sets, things like that. So it seems like, you know, they're gearing towards trying to allow players to bring in their favorite big models in some way, like that Skaven monster creation that was in there. So that way, you know, you can have a much more versatile range, where if you know that your opponent's bringing in a Chimera with them, you're going to want to bring in something huge too, because otherwise that Chimera is probably going to tear you apart. And so having a lot of those options that you didn't have before definitely is going to help there. But definitely some very cool stuff. Really looking forward to getting into these and diving deeper. You can expect to see some reviews, one for each book. We're not going to be doing them all together and just do a little blurb about them. We're going to do a full review per book. And then anyone that's been following the site will probably have seen that we released a bunch of chaos themed articles on the different warbands, you know, their main play style, you know, different abilities, things like that. And we're going to be doing the same with all of the individual Warcry warbands eventually. So look forward to those. Now, next week, the reason why we didn't do it this week is because I simply forgot to grab it to get it ready for filming. But next week we'll be doing the newest issue of White Dwarf, looking at those cards that come with it, and we'll be resuming painting to finish up the Skies of Fire box set. But that's it for tonight. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you all next week. Good night.